Mom.
Come on, Ted, get into it. Dance with the tree.
Oh, it hurts, Mom. Please stop. So, anyway, let's just say I need a tree. Where would I go? What do I do?
Oh, then you know what? You'd need to find the Onceler.
The what?
Mom, it's not really the time for one of your, magical fables, okay?
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'm old and can't even remember to put my teeth in.
Stand down. That's not what I meant.
No, really, I forgot my teeth. Would you be a dear and go get them for me?
Sure, Mom.
Okay, here's the deal. The Onceler is the man who knows what happened to the trees. You want one? You need to find him.
The Onceler? Okay. Grammy, is this a real thing that we're talking about now?
Oh, he's real, all right.
Well, where can I find him? Ah!
Far outside of town where the grass never grows, and the wind smells slow and sour when it blows. Ooh! And no birds ever sing excepting old crows.
Oh! Quit doing that!
That's the place where the Onceler lives.
Wait, outside of town? Hey!
People used to say, if you brought him 15 cents, a nail, and the shell of a great-great-great-grandfather snail, he'd tell you everything.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of ColoniaBook.com and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
We are wrapping up Banned Book Month here at Book versus Movie. It's one we enjoy, but also, can't help but we shouldn't have to have Banned Book Month, but here we are. But anyway, if you're new, we're going to get into the Dr. Seuss of it all in a little bit here. We talk about movies that have been adapted from books. In this case, we're talking about a children's book, also sort of meant for adults. But anyway, we try to do a brand new episode every single week. And that means that we really will consider a movie that's been adapted from any kind of literary source whatsoever. It could be a short story, it could be a song, could be a play, a novella. We will consider magazine article, as long as it's been adapted into a movie that we can easily get our eyeballs on. It's streaming somewhere, and we can easily get the source material, and you can too. Those are the only ground rules, really. We will consider it, and we are constantly looking for suggestions. We are just about to go into one of our favorite months of the year, October, where we get to do ooky spooky ghosty movies. I cannot wait. I am very, very excited for next week. And we're actually going to have a special guest next week as well, right?
Yep, so tune in to find out.
You have to find out who it is a little bit later. And, if you have suggestions or you're new to us, you want to meet other listeners, you want to interact with us on the internet, there's a few places where you can find us.
We do have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it. All the episodes are posted there, but we're much more interactive in our Facebook group. You type in Book versus Movie Podcast group and you ask to join. We have 2 posts at the top that Thaddeus posted for us. One is of a list of the past episodes of things we've covered, and the other one is a running list of ideas people have, but also you could just post in there your ideas. We also are on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram. And at those places, you spell out book versus and movie. And we have an old-timey email, book versus movie podcast, spell that all out at gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, let us know. We'll drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help keep us in books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. We've been doing the show for 9 years now, and we keep a 2 years worth of shows in the basic feed that is free for all of you. Everything else we've posted to our wall. We have things there like Silence of the Lambs and Psycho, really great episodes. And we have a couple of very affordable options. And it really, truly just helps us get the books and the movies and pay for the hosting costs for the show. And I'd like to say thank you to Jesse, who just signed up for Patreon. We really mean it. Thank you, Jesse.
Really, thank you so much. It does help a lot. This is just something we do for funsies. We never imagined that we would be going on a decade, a whole decade of book versus movie. What? We're so glad that you're all along for the ride. And okay, now I'm trying to remember what was the last Dr. Seuss, because we've done Dr. Seuss before. And I seem to recall that the last time we did Dr. Seuss was when there was all the brouhaha, that academic paper came out, kind of reanalyzing his work. But what were we talking? I can't remember what book it was.
It must have been
about.
The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Oh,
Because
it had to have been, right?
Right, because we did the original 1967 animated version, and then we did the Ron Howard live action version. They haven't adapted a lot. Audrey Geisel, who was his wife, had that all locked down on adaptations because he didn't like a few of the early ones.
Although, I mean, the estate, I can't remember when she passed. You know, she lived here in San Diego. They met and lived in La Jolla. And I think I talked about this before, that I had a friend who was his paper girl, delivered his newspaper. If I remember correctly, he had kind of a reputation for not being terribly fond of children.
They didn't have any, and he did not want them, and made that very clear to his first wife and then his second wife.
I'm trying to find when Audrey passed. Was she still alive when this movie was made?
Yes, she was.
That sounds about right. I know it wasn't that long ago.
Yes, because she's thanked in the credits. She's like a co-producer on it.
Okay.
Right.
So Audrey was still around when this film was produced. Is that correct?
Yes. She's listed as a producer.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. Here in San Diego, every holiday season, I think even before Thanksgiving, the musical The Grinch Who Stole Christmas at the Old Globe Theater, and it is a humongous extravaganza. It's actually really cool. If you are ever in San Diego during anything remotely close to the holiday season, because it starts super early and runs after into the new year, I believe, check it out. It's super, super fun. It's very good. They always do a super good job. And they make the whole courtyard into like Whoville. It's very cool. Talked about him before. I don't want to go like too into the weeds with Dr. Seuss, but look, did revolutionize children's literature, and he did a lot of important stuff. But yes, he also did some stuff that really did not age well at all, and had some views that also did not age well at all. There's some personal stuff in his life that is not fun to learn about. This is one of those situations where you kind of have to separate the art from the artist. There's not a lot of children's literature that we still read from the era where Dr. Seuss exploded with The Cat in the Hat, right? Dick and Jane, you and I probably were the last generation to kind of get Dick and Jane in school and stuff like that. Could not be more boring. Was
Spot.
Very, very dull. Dick, Jane, and Spot. Look, Jane, look, it is father. I mean, it was literally like that for those of you who are young enough to have been spared Dick and Jane. There's not that much children's literature. I mean, for small children, picture books that captured the American imagination the way that Dr. Seuss, I mean, so many of us can almost recite The Cat in the Hat by heart, because we're just so familiar with it, and it is still it's delightful. And when you read it compared to the other stuff that was going on at the time, it is just a revelation, and it's fantastic. And I like a lot of his later work too. I'm a big fan of a lot of his work, and especially being from San Diego, like it's very. You drive around here, and the landscape is very Seussian. Our kind of strange coastal desert landscape shows up a lot in his work, especially this one. I think there's a lot of very coastal desert kind of looking stuff. Anyway, let's talk about him. Is he from Illinois? Am I remembering correctly? From Springfield,
Massachusetts. He was born. It's important. It's Theodore Seuss Geisel. It's the German pronunciation is Seuss, rhyming with voice. Seuss is an anglicized, American version. He was born 1904. He was educated at Dartmouth and then at Oxford. He was a very bright man. I mean, yeah.
And also not short on cash, I think.
Right. I mean,
his dad was like a brewer or something, right?
And then the Prohibition era hit, but they still managed to make money. He met his first wife while in college. He dropped out of college, and he was always drawing things. Drawing was a big, illustration was a big interest for him. He worked for magazines. He worked at ad agencies. He was very much in demand. He and his wife never had kids. They had no interest in it. So they had this money to just spend on what they want. They never worked regular hours. They traveled often around the world. During World War II, he became active in working for the government in the propaganda campaigns. And this is where you would see a lot of things that are anti-Asian, anti-Japanese, pro-internment camps.
Yeah, he's like a fan of that decision to imprison our own citizenry for what they look like.
Yeah, and he later on, by the way, said, no, I don't believe that. I understand how wrong that is now. But a lot of people were frightened and a lot of people went along with that. He was also a Roosevelt fan. And anyway, in the 50s, he started writing children's books, and he was just basically tasked by a friend of his that loved his illustrations and his wordplay and said, but you have too many words. What if you cut your words down to like 250, 300 words max in a book? And then he took that as the challenge, and that's when he had If I Ran the Zoo, Horton Hears a Who, The Cat in the Hat, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Green Eggs and Ham, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, which I used to love, The Sneetches and other stories. These are all classics, like you said, of children's literature. It is very hard to break in that market. People try to write children's books all the time. He was genius at it. As I said, later on in his life, he completely backed away from those views and apologized and did not want to be known for that. But he was still a complicated man. His first wife passed away due to suicide, and then he married a second one less than a year after she died. That was his mistress. So there was talk about that.
Yeah, and she was terminally. The first wife was terminally ill. That's not how she died, but she'd been ill for some time, and it's
complicated. I mean,
it's complicated.
They were together a long time. They
absolutely were.
Absolutely. I mean, his second wife, who was the executor of his estate. He passed away, by the way, at the age of 87 in 1991. She passed away just a few years ago, but she is associated as a producer on this film. He did not like the original. There was a cartoon version of The Cat in the Hat that he didn't enjoy. I think he really liked Grinch Who Stole Christmas. Who wouldn't? It's a class. I mean, here in America, anyway.
It's phenomenal.
Yes,
it's so good.
It really holds
and
up.
We're not referring to the live action that was way later. We're talking about the original animated Chuck Jones classic. It's so true to the book. The music is fantastic. Mm-hmm. The characterization, bringing those characters to life. Chuck Jones. I mean, what's better than that?
Right.
Yeah. So I get it. And we've seen, his work. It's a hit and miss. The adaptations there's not, as Margos said, there hasn't been a lot of them, and they've been up and down.
He made a fortune in his life. He didn't have to buy, that didn't pay his bills. That was just extra for him to have that. So anyway, that's what he's known for. In the press in the last few years, there's been a lot of going back and wanting to take books of his, and there have been books of his that have been stricken from libraries because of their racial content. That could be an argument in of itself. Like it's a teachable moment to talk to kids about these things, like they do with cartoons, like old Warner Brothers cartoons. They will say this was from a different time.
Yeah, there's some racist tropes in there. And in some of his not for children work, things using the N-word, it's not for nothing.
Not for
criticism
nothing.
and reevaluation. But this is like Margot says, when we have it is an opportunity to bringing this out in the open and talking about it and talking about why it was okay then, I think is a valuable conversation to have. I do go back and forth, I don't know how I feel about like a small child in a public library, toddling over and pulling out a book that's got something like really overtly racist from the 1930s or whatever, without having an adult, a teacher, an educator there to kind of walk them through it. But I also think these conversations, not having the conversations to me is just as dangerous as
I agree.
as more dangerous than anything else. Like when we talked about book burning, and Fahrenheit 451. Like you burn the books, you don't even get the chance to have the conversation. That's just so. Yeah, it's important to recognize that not every people are complicated and times are complicated and things are right and wrong. Of course there are things that are always right and wrong, but why is it that sometimes we think things that are wrong are right? What are the things in history that lead to so many people being totally cool with
Racism.
some of racism and sexism and rape culture and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I do. I have very mixed feelings about it, but and I can't, just like J.K. Rowling right now as well, right? How many children got into reading because of those books?
Right.
Millions of children around the world are reading. I mean, it was a measurable bump up in the children's interest in reading because of these books. And similarly with Dr. Seuss, children became interested in reading, became interested in books because his books are so fun, they are so engaging, and many of them are extremely educational too. While they're funny and clever and fun to say, they really have helped now at this point generations of children become interested in books and literature, and that's not to be denied either. Humans.
I mean, and I said before, by the way, that there weren't a lot of adaptations. There were some TV adaptations, because I remember seeing them when I was a little kid, but they were like half an hour on TV. Like, to do a big feature-length version of his work, it's been very spotty, to say the least, the output.
And children's books in general, just for those of you who maybe don't have children, you don't read a lot of children's books. Children's books tend to be around under 35 pages long, with a lot of pictures and a paragraph at least, or about at most a paragraph of text per page, something like that. So you're not going to get terribly intricate plots and subplots, is what I'm saying. And so, yeah, when you adapt it into a feature-length movie, you must flesh out the plot a little bit, or in some cases, invent a plot, because sometimes it's just about the fun of the words, right? This one actually has a message, but just like with the Grinch, in the live-action Grinch, they had to even though the Grinch, that is such an interesting story, and there's a lot there already. It's one of his longer books, I think. You still have to add extra plot and storylines in there to stretch it out to a 90-minute movie. So we get that going in when we're talking about children's books. But let's talk about the Lorax. I hadn't read it in a long time.
I read it as a kid. I don't remember seeing the TV version. That's, by the way, on YouTube. You can find. There's Eddie Albert, I believe, does the.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So I remember. I mean, I liked Horton here. I loved all the Dr. Seuss. I was always into Seuss. Like, if you had some in my face, I'd watch it. Yeah.
I think I had all of them at home.
Yeah.
And I don't know who that was producing those short ones.
It was CBS.
When we were kids.
There was DePatsy Freelance Enterprises. Sorry, it's traditional animation. And CBS, ABC, and then Turner, Daisy Head Maisie. I don't know that one. But all these, like, early 70s ones were on CBS.
Yeah, I remember them very well. They were good. They were super good.
Yeah.
They weren't like, state-of-the-art animation or anything like that, but they didn't need to be.
You had Dr. Seuss. That's all you needed. You just, like I said, there's an economy of words that he uses to tell his stories when he's doing children's books. So, yeah, you have to add to the script to make it into something feature-length. We just came upon a very funny parody of the book, or, somebody felt the need to, like, exactly give the other side. Okay. But the Lorax was written in 1971. As I said before, Dr. Seuss and his spouse liked to travel, and he had just been to Africa, and he noticed that there were certain species that he had never seen before, and that they were telling him it could become extinct because of the hunting, because of different sort of capitalism.
Capitalism.
Just, yeah, exactly. That just can affect things when you're just talking more about the bottom line versus the bigger picture. And he came back home and he, like I said, he was worried about those animals. And so he came up with the Lorax, and the Lorax is that talks to the trees. And there's a lot of, that's also when we were kids, and this, you know, this came out when we were little kids, you were barely born that this time, but there was a lot of talk about the environment. There was a very famous commercial we used to see all the time of a Native American crying by the side of the highway,
By the side of
people
but he
throwing
was
trash.
he was it was okay. Talk about racism.
Yes.
So some of you may be familiar with this commercial, and it's this. Yeah, the actor is dressed in generic, quote unquote, Native American costume. I think he's on a canoe, and he's rowing across a stream, and then he gets out and sees all like the stream is all littered with trash, and yeah, he ends up by the highway. And we mentioned this before, that like when you and I were children, there was so much garbage on the highway. Like, people don't understand. They would like pull into a fast food joint, get their burgers, which were in styrofoam in those days. You get
styrofoam. Do you remember that
box? Oh yes.
God.
And you'd all eat your burgers in the car, and then like, okay, let's clean up the car, roll down the windows, and throw everything out the window. I mean, that is literally what people did. So there he is on the side of the highway, and there's all this garbage like being blown up against him. There's like onslaught of garbage, and then a close up on his face with a single tear. And you and I, our generation, traumatized by that public service announcement.
Well, yeah, because it's gross to just throw trash.
Remember, help Woodsy spread the word. We were really, we grew up, think about Gen X, we always say, is that we were raised by television, and to a large extent, there was a lot of messaging, ecological messaging about littering in particular, like don't be a litter bug, and Woodsy the owl, and the Indian
Earth Day
by the Earth Day, and also, what do you name? Smokey the Bear. I mean, just we had a lot of stuff like this. So I remember just being like, we can't litter, and my parents were like, what are you talking about? Like, we're just cleaning up the car,
Right. They didn't. Right.
So this was something that for kids our age at this time was very much in our consciousness. And also there was concern about logging that was going on, especially like on the West Coast and in different parts, and mining. And there was a lot of like starting to finally look at, well, what is going. We were also having the, as you mentioned recently, like the gas lines,
yes,
the fuel crisis, fossil fuels. And we were the first generation that was being taught about that. So this book is very timely in that regard. It's very much dovetailing into a lot of other stuff that we kids were hearing at the time, I think is what I'm trying to say.
And at the time, the EPA was started by Richard Nixon. It wasn't considered so much of a liberal versus conservative.
It wasn't a hippy dippy skippy organization.
No, exactly. I mean, there was some hippie stuff about I'd like to teach the world to sing. There was all of this stuff about being diverse and embracing the planet. It might not be here forever. There was the threat of nuclear war a few times. In our parents' generation for sure. And then us growing up, we had the No Nukes concert. There's all kinds of things about the environment, also population and overpopulation, but just being eco-conscious, just how many resources we have and how many are renewable and what we need them for. And he didn't like to write message books. He wanted to just create the story, and then you will get from it what you think you should get from it.
Yes.
A little sugar.
Although sometimes
with the medicine.
Sometimes there was, or I should say often, like the Sneetches.
Yeah.
The Sneetches is a very like Cold War kind of a story. And this is another one like that's not quite. I had forgotten about this book. As I said, I hadn't read it in many years, probably since I read it to my kids. It's a bummer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they didn't know what was happening. I mean, also the Vietnam War is going on. There's a lot. There's a lot going on in the world. It's a new decade. What are we getting into? What's going to happen by the end of that decade? He had no kids to leave things to, but he had this was his audience, and they were starting to have kids. So this was, of course, it was something that's on his mind. So we have the Lorax, and he is the protector of the trees. And we meet the Oscillator,
Onceler.
Onceler, sorry, the one.
Yeah.
I should put on my reading glasses, but he's sorry, but it's about the Trufala trees. Is that how it's pronounced? Trufala
Yeah.
trees. And it's about environmental activism, but they're the trees that are being poached because their leaves make hats and scarves and all kinds of things that people want. So they keep chopping down the trees to get what they want. And so eventually there aren't as many trees. And so the Onceler is trying to warn about this and about...
He's okay. So the book starts with unnamed child boy who is walking this desolate looking. It is a serious bummer. This desolate landscape of stumps and ash. This apocalyptic kind of landscape, and he's going to visit this character, the Onceler, who he may or may not exist. And he pays him 15 cents and a snail and something else to hear the Onceler's story. And the Onceler, you don't see his face. You just see his eyes peeking out from behind his like weird little shack that he lives in. He tells his story is that he's a young man. He comes upon this place where they are right now. And it's a beautiful paradise. There's animals and color, Dr. Seuss, like only Dr. Seuss can do, with these beautiful colors and fanciful, creatures and these beautiful trees, these truffula trees. And he discovers, the Onceler, that by cutting down a tree and using the top, like they have like a tuft, kind of like a dandelion's head, and that using that stuff on top, he can create, all this thing called the thneed, which is a multi-purpose garment that does a lot of good for people. It fills a lot of needs for folks. And he's like, wow, this is really, I could actually make a living at this. But then the Lorax pops up out of the stump of the tree, this little, kind of like a wood sprite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with a little mustache, very cute. And says, like, what are you doing? We can't just we all want to make a living, but you don't, like, the tree deserves to live. Yeah, come on, dude. And what about all these other kids, the bird and the fish and the so on, the barbaloots that depend on, it's all an ecosystem. Like it's all gotta work for us all to stay alive, And this young man, like, doesn't want to hear it. He's like, yeah, I guess I just cut down one tree. Will you calm down?
Right.
But over time, gradually, as people are wanting his thneed that he is making from the truffula trees, he was like, well, I'll just chop down one more, and I'll just chop down 4 over there. And he starts developing more and more effective ways to chop down more and more trees. And he's becoming more and more wealthy. What could possibly go wrong? And
well, doesn't his family join him, or is it just in the movie?
I think that's just in the movie.
Yeah, there's some differences, actually. Like Margos said, they add some characters in the movie.
Yeah.
But
I'm trying to remember. I'll look and see if his family shows up in the book, but I don't think so. I think it's just him. I think that's part of the story, is that it's just this one guy who has done all of this damage. And doesn't seem to be a bad guy. He's not an evil guy. He's not like, I'm going to kill all these little woodland creatures. He's like, hey, I could make a thing out of this tree. Isn't that cool? And if I had 2 trees, I could make more, and people want them. I'm helping them. And so it's really about how, again, like capitalism, like Margot said, it's a double-edged sword, right? It can be helpful, but it can also do a lot of harm if we don't consider the big picture. So gradually, as there are fewer and fewer trees, the Lorax sends away the fish, so they will continue. Maybe they can find someplace else to live. Sends
the
away
fish on the land.
They get up and walk away. That's really sweet. And the barbaloots, who are these little kind of bear-like creatures, and the birds, they're very cute. And the Onceler's just not getting it. He just does not understand, like, what is the big deal? There's still some trees. There's still trees here. Chill out, Lorax. And then eventually, yes, what happens is we lose the last tree. Then what do you do?
And his family does leave him. I see it in here in my notes. The relatives do leave him. And he's wondering what the hell happened. Like, wait a second, why is everyone gone? And it's because you took away all the resources. And then the Lorax leaves, like they're all checking out the fish and everybody. that can make it, like, because they're starving and they're not able to breathe. So they leave a pile of rocks and it says unless. And that's what the Once-a-Lot is trying to figure out, like, what's unless? And that's when he realizes, like, nothing's going to improve unless you're willing to change, unless you're willing to see how you are part of the problem. So then you could be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
And that's the story.
You have to care.
And he gives the boy a seed, and the boy then realizes, oh, and we were kids, we got seeds and stuff too. Grow trees. They still do that. They live next door to a school, and those kids plant trees all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. And that
I've
is
planted a number of trees myself.
same. And I love a tree. I'm a big tree fan myself. But that's when the boy has the truffula seed, and so so that's what he's going to do. And he hopes that this way the Lorax and all the animals will come home.
I'd like to know what did you read this as a kid?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm interested to know what your childhood impression was, because I remember thinking as a child, because again, this book is a bummer. It's a stone bummer.
I don't remember reading this more than once, to be honest.
He shows you this beautiful paradise, and then the whole rest of the book is it going away, like bit by bit. And you're like, what?
And the bear's starving and walking away. And I remember as a kid, that's just like, I don't want to read this again.
And I remember like getting to the end of the book and being like, one seed, like what if the seed, because I knew from seeds, like you said, we had people, it was a thing at the time, like children were given seeds all the time.
Yep.
And we knew that when you planted a bunch of seeds, a lot of them didn't grow. A lot of them would not grow. And that's just how seeds work,
And some of us have black thumb, pointing at myself.
Yeah. And so I'm like, well, what if that's one of the, like, you guys, he's got one seed. What if it doesn't grow? What if this is the one where the duds? Then what? What do we do?
What happens to the fishies?
Yeah, just good luck going to sleep after reading that one, kids. I mean, it's such a bummer. It's a serious bummer.
It's a stone cold bummer, and it hasn't been banned so much. I mean, there was one time in California. So in the 80s, there was a lot about the logging industry that also was in the news.
Yes.
Deforestation, and yes, sure, trees are a renewable resource, but how many do you cut? How do you go about replacing them? Okay, so you live in Southern California. I lived in Northern California for a while, but I drove into LA. And when you used to drive to LA, late 80s, early 90s, the smog that covered the city.
In the 70s, I remember in the 70s, because we would drive from San Diego up to Oxnard, and to do that, you have to go through Los Angeles. And from miles away from Los Angeles, it was like if you were looking at the horizon and somebody took a Sharpie and just went over the horizon. It was this band of sludge that hung in the air all the time.
Awful. I mean, you could see it from the distance, and you just kind of go like, what are people doing? Why is this okay to happen? But there's certain industries, like, yes, and I understand it's a lifeline for people. Like, that's what they do. They have a logging plant. This is, there's lots of trees where they are. So yes, indeed, it's a renewable resource. But how do you stay in business? What effect does it have on the entire environment? How often do things grow? So the flooring industry had a very hard time, understanding the Lorax. So there is a book that was created with a couple of different wooden floor associations. It's called the Truax.
Yeah.
And the Truax makes a whole point of saying, like, but trees, you chop them down and then you build them up again. And that way the animals have a place to stay. And it's not a parody.
And isn't it nice not to have those awful ticks?
Isn't it? And I mean, you sent me the audiobook and I lasted like 10 seconds because
it's so bad.
It's so bad. Like there's librarians that read this. Once again, like I'm not against logging in general. I mean, I understand we do need trees. We need paper. Look, I use enough paper to like embarrassing amount, especially at the way the world is nowadays. But yeah, we still have to think about our industries and what harm they do. And, are you blowing smoke into the air? That's terrible. Are you pouring things into the drinking water? That's terrible. Like there's all kinds of things to think about.
And not just that. I mean, especially one of the things that struck me reading this book in 2023 was, and never thought about it before, was the idea of fast fashion that we talk about now. You know, the need is fast fashion. He's churning out these garments at tremendous cost to the planet. You know, he doesn't care. The longer it goes, like the better, more successful, quote unquote, successful he becomes, the less he cares about the damage that he's doing.
That's a good point, because that happened in our generation. The fast fashion, we didn't have that as like teenagers. There was like a couple places to shop to get things.
It happened later.
It happened later, like in the 90s and then in 2000s, and we have like Uniqlo and we have Old Navy. We have all these brands that are cheaper to get the stuff you want, because Gap was getting too pricey for some people.
Right.
But what happens is, like, you buy, like, how many T-shirts do you own that you're just like, I never wear this. I don't like the fabric, or it doesn't fit right, or it's got a logo I don't care about.
I watched it that one time.
Yes. I wore it. I got it after that one race that I did. And what do we do with it? We kind of throw them out, or we just send them to, what am I thinking of? Like
other countries, you know, that. But even then, they don't want it. There's too much.
There's
of it.
too much.
There's
so
too
now
much
they're trying to figure out, like, how do we take all this fabric and then make something from it, like beds and mattresses and bedding and things like that, something that's usable, because it just is clogging up the planet. Like, and that's become a huge problem. So there's all kinds of things. Like, we can create cheap something that people like, but at what cost ultimately?
Yeah, and I think reading this as an adult now, I was struck because I remembered it as being a book about cutting down trees, which it arguably is. But I think, you know, again, reading it now, it struck me as it's about that, but it is also about how, as a society, we make these choices. Oh, wow, these T-shirts are really cheap, you know, and incrementally we are contributing to the problem. Not that we're evil people. Like, this guy is not an evil guy. It's just, it becomes very easy the more removed you get from the problem to not realize your role in the damage.
Do you remember also, I'm sorry, Margo, like people saying things like, oh, we can't chop down that tree because there's this bird nest in there. And then that becomes like trivialized to like or didn't Daryl Hannah live in a tree for a while, like to protest?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because they're talking about the entire ecosystem being affected by it. It's not just the tree. That's the whole point. It's not just the tree. We like our wooden floors too. You know, I love my wooden floors, but you know, there's a cost to everything. So I put a link in the show notes for the Truax. I mean,
take a glance.
Take a glance.
Take a glance.
But it's like not attractive decorations or
it's not good anything. It's not good writing. It's not good illustration. And just take a second and be like, wow, the flooring industry really got together on this.
They had their knickers in a twist. And this is a few years before she passed away, or he passed. It was like 4 years after he passed away. So he dies in 91. This comes out in 95. But for the most part, Audrey, his wife, like I said, kept an iron lock on things. So this is one of the few feature-length movies. Like we said, we did cover The Grinch. And we found out that there's a whole continents out there that never knew about the 1967 version, only knew the Ron Howard version. Yeah. We were surprised to find that out.
Let's take a little break.
Yes, we need a break.
Play the trailer and get into this movie.
Close. Yes!
Did your ball land in my backyard again?
A model airplane, this time.
Let's go take a look.
Whoa! This is amazing! What are those?
Those are trees. They used to grow all around here. What I want more than anything is to see a real living tree.
Light and day.
So, Mom, do you happen to know if there's, like, any place where I could get a real tree?
More than I can let by or not. More than you've got.
chop down this tree?
What's that?
I think he did it.
You have been warned. Thanks.
Yeah, okay.
You have been warned.
Chris Renaud directed this movie. The screenplay is by Cinco Paul and Ken Dario. It stars Danny DeVito, Ed Helms, here's some names here. Zac Efron, Taylor Swift. Have you heard of her?
Taylor Swift of Cats fame.
We covered Cats, by the way. We did.
What if all she ever did was Cats and this movie?
She needs to start acting. She needs to just take over the planet, I think. Betty White, R.I.P. Jenny Slate as the kid's mom, who's hilarious in this movie. And Rob Riggle, the evil person. Ed Helms plays the Wentzler. Ted Wiggins, he's the little boy. They give him a name. And I guess Ted is for Theodore. And then his crush is Audrey, which I guess is for Mrs. Seuss.
Yeah, Theodore, again, being Dr. Seuss's real first name.
Right.
So, Margot, before we get into this, I want to say, so I was watching this movie.
With your kids or no?
No, not with my kids. I was watching it, and they walked into the room, and they went, "You're watching that? Why are you watching this?" And I was like, "We're doing it this week, a book versus movie." And both the kids were like, "Oh, Mom, we're sorry." If you've never seen this film, I had never seen this film before. Had you seen this film before? Nope. Okay, so Margot, just to give people a taste of how the rest of this episode's going to go, how about if you just hum a few bars of your favorite song from this movie?
There's too much music. It's all padded.
There's too much music, and none of it is memorable. I can't remember a single song. I know that there's one song that the Wentzler sings about how bad can I be. I can't tell you how it goes.
No, and there's like a Thneedville that leads it's one of I pulled clips for this show, and everything was a music video that I was, because this is before I was pulling them before I actually watched the movie, and I'm like, yeah, there's very little dialogue here. Ted Wiggins lives in Thneedville. He has a crush on a girl, Audrey. He has his grandma, Norma. These are additions to the plot. Audrey, the mother. Yeah,
none of this is.
Grandma.
The boy doesn't have a name in the book. He just shows up at the Wentzler, and the Wentzler tells the story, and that is the book. But again, we get it. You have to have a plot.
Right.
That book is not a 90-minute movie. It's not. And the cast is, again, this is another situation. Like nobody's bad-mouthing this cast. They are doing their job. What is this movie? Mark, help me understand. What did I just see?
It doesn't make any sense. It's kind of boring. It's very repetitive. The Lorax is cute. I like Danny DeVito. I think
all the performances are very good.
Yeah. There's too much singing. There's actually a point where Ted starts talking to Audrey in Dr. Seuss language, and then they stop and giggle. And I'm like they're making fun of it. I'm like, but isn't this the movie we're doing? And he's known for his wordplay.
Dr. Seuss has that particular rhythm of Dr. Seuss that he, and it's never going to get better. It's not. I don't understand the choices. I'm baffled by the choices, not the casting choices, and not even the choices. I like he's got a grandma and a mom.
Yeah.
I like it's Jenny Slate and Betty White. I think that works great. I like that he has a crush on a girl. Okay. It's all the other.
It's so repetitive.
Stuff.
We've seen this before. The evil guy at the corporation who's like really little, but has like these really big guards around. That's been done before. And it's also, would you say, Despicable Me? That's what he did before this. There's so many
Yes,
nods
which was
to
a
that.
mega hit.
Yes.
Of course.
There's so many nods to that to like keep that audience happy. But they break into song like every other minute, and I'm just like, that's when I would go to the
many
bathroom.
songs.
I keep looking at my phone. I'm like, no, I got to pay attention.
Dude.
It's
No, you don't, because the songs are not. And this is the other thing that bugs me about this movie. There's so many things. It was such a waste of time. I'm sorry, I really hated this movie. So many songs, not at all memorable songs. I can't hum a single blasted one, and the songs don't advance the plot at all, not in the least. They're just filling up space and taking up my life. And what are we doing? You have the evil guy. Why do we have to have the Onceler is the evil guy? The guy that chopped down the trees. The whole point is he's not actually evil. He's just making bad choices that lead to evil consequences. That's kind of the point of the book. Why are you bringing in an actually evil mastermind? We're blurring muddying the waters here for children, I feel.
It's been done to death. There's like Boss Baby. There's like a bunch of movies with this very same theme, which is, and look, I got my problems with capitalism. You already got me there. If I'm complaining about that, you haven't executed it well, because that's usually my catnip. Like, I'm totally on board with that.
Look here.
Yeah.
I work for a labor union.
Right.
And I've had it with this theme.
Just like, it's honest to God, you guys, it's just not even worth that much of a deep discussion. I'm sorry. I like Zac Efron. I love Taylor Swift. I love all these people.
I'm not mad at any of the performances.
No, it looks good.
Rob Riggle, who plays the evil guy, is doing an amazing job with what they've given him. He's doing as well as he can possibly do. I don't understand, why did we introduce an evil villain when the whole point is the Onceler's story? I don't get that at all. I feel like children can handle that. Obviously, they've handled it for almost over 50 years with this book. We can handle it in a movie. And why didn't we get, it's like we've adapted this book, a classic Dr. Seuss book with big themes for kids. And you make a movie that is, I'm going to say, 70% not this book. The part of the movie that is actually the book and the themes of the book is like 30% of the movie. Why? Why are we doing this? Grinch, the Ron Howard Grinch. As much of the problems that we had with that film, it didn't. It was still, on the whole, advancing the original story concept. We were adding extra things, of course, and letting Jim Carrey do his thing, but it wasn't like a completely different story.
And better music
with this
too.
one as an addendum in the back. Oh, it had better music as an addendum in the background. The actual story of the book. I don't get it. Why? It's a compelling story by itself. Let's have more Danny DeVito. Let's give Ed Helms better stuff to say and sing. Why didn't we? I feel like, why are we focusing over here on what should be like that should be the 30% part, and we're missing the main part, the main point.
They've made like the family that shows up and Ed Helms. I'm not sorry, Rob Riggle as the bad guys.
Thank you. That's the other problem I have, is the whole thing about the book, again, is that the Onceler is not a bad guy, but he's making these choices one by one as he's becoming wealthier and wealthier. And he's like, I'll chop down a few more trees. In this version, the Oncelers promise to not cut down any more trees. And then his family swoops in and they're the ones who cut down the trees. And he's like helpless in the background. That's not the message.
It's about taking responsibility for your choices. Book. I knew something was up and I posted it. I think I posted on Facebook. I posted on TikTok. One of the ways they promoted the movie is they had on The Voice, they had Zac Efron and Betty White.
That was really something. I had never seen that, Margot, until I saw it on.
I didn't either, because I don't watch The Voice. But that was cute. But even then, that's not the message of the movie at all.
It's not the message.
And it's not the song they use in the movie. So
nope.
So why?
Okay.
I mean, look, we all miss Betty White. I'll watch her, and Zac Efron's is a great eye candy, and he's funny, and Danny DeVito, of course, I can listen to him crack wise all day, but it's not enough. And I know this made a lot of money, but there's a reason why there's no Lorax 2 or anything. Or
no,
nobody talks about it.
And you failed to deliver the message of the book, and you also failed to deliver another message, another good, better message, big mess. We've seen this so many times. Despicable Me, it's about him becoming a father to these 3 girls. It's him discovering that he loves these, them becoming a family and what that means. That's a big, good message. This is not a good message. What's our takeaway here for kids?
Right.
Don't go into business with your relatives. Not a bad message.
That's not bad. That's solid advice, but that's not the problem. That's not what was happening in the book, and that's not what he was warning about.
No.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, it isn't.
It's a stone cold bummer, and believe me, we go in wanting to enjoy things. That's our jam. We want to have fun with it because we have limited time, like you do. We want to use it wisely. Yeah,
it's just, and the same thing, like at the end, like all this, just like to plant the tree. You can plant it in a freaking Dixie cup. It's a seed. It doesn't need. What are you doing? What are we doing here? And the tree's gonna. Now what? Then we don't know what's gonna. It's. No.
No.
Nope.
No, like.
No, it's not going on to Hollywood.
Well, that's how we feel. Let us know how you feel. All those places I mentioned at the top of the show. I forgot to mention, Margot, we got a review this week in iTunes, 5 stars from Santa Claus, Indiana, saying thank you for featuring banned books. I guess she's a librarian, so she's happy that we do that. So we will be back next week with another episode where we have a special guest. You have to tune in for that.
Yeah, but we should let them know what we're doing.
Yeah, so we are going to be covering Ghost World, which started as a graphic novel, and it's actually like a graphic short story. And we have that short story book that we both have that's filled with all adaptations. And the book we were going to do something else, but it wasn't available on streaming. That's very important, it has to be available on streaming. So we are going to cover Ghost World, which is streaming everywhere. And the book is a really quick read, and it's easily available. And it's a good movie. I remember really loving it. So... And it's got the word ghost in it, so that gets us ready for October.
That makes me happy.
Yes,
I love all the ghosty things. Yeah, I don't like blood and gore, and I especially don't like things that like could happen.
Yeah,
that really I like. If I'm going to be up all night with that, but ghosties, I'm all over it. I love it. I cannot wait. I love October.
We get a lot of requests.
We still need ideas.
We do need ideas. I was going to say, let the right one in. A lot of you have asked for that. Margot is forbidden from watching that movie. As her friend, I know it is gruesome and it involves children. And
no.
It's one of my favorites, but it's dark. It is really dark. So not that gruesome.
I can't. This is just to give you guys an idea. That movie with Nicole Kidman. And then there was the trailer for it. And in the trailer, they
with the kids
just that little thing, the little girl going, "You're mad. I am your daughter." I'm like, not, no.
That's a good movie.
I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. So nothing like we did Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist. Like, that's fine. But like, it isn't going to be, I mean, first of all, it's just too long. Also, we got to keep it.
Oh, it's very long.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. I'm very excited for Ghost World because I have never seen it.
Yeah, so send us your suggestions, everybody. Everything I mentioned at the top of the show, once again, our email is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We would both super appreciate that. Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all of my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brooklyn Margot. I'm on Instagram and Threads at Brooklyn Fit Chick. My site is Brooklyn Fit Chick. And if you want to see my Lorax clips that I have, the few that I collected on TikTok. It's at my name, Margot Donahue, or I think it's also at Brooklyn Margot. All right, everybody, we'll be back next week with Ghost World. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book versus Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's Book versus Movie Podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn Fit Chick on social media and Margot P at She's Nacho Mama.